Morning, church. I gotta steal this move from Billy. It's good to see y'all. Good to see y'all. I don't know if any of you have preached out of the Gospel of John before, but it is a trip every time. I get into a text and I think I know exactly what it's about because, I dedicated a significant portion of my formal education to studying this thing we call the Bible, and John is part of it. And then I get into it and I just get turned around. And so here's the journey that Jesus led me on this week, and I invite you along for it. Can we pray? Lord God, we are grateful that you have called us to be your sheep. We are grateful that you have called us to be your children. We're just grateful for who you are. Help us to know you a little more in the coming minutes and hours and days of our week. We pray in your name. Amen. Most of us probably don't have much to do with sheep, and probably haven't had much to do. Nope, that was part of the trip I went on. I just wrote the sentence twice. Maybe we count sheep as we fall asleep. Maybe we eat them at a fancy meal. Maybe we pet them at a petting zoo. But that's probably about it. Maybe Gary, I don't know. You've had something to do with sheep? Nope, Gary's had nothing to do with sheep, and he's the closest thing to a real rancher farmer that I think I know. Supposedly, a long time ago, my aunt raised sheep, and we went to visit her just up a little farther north from here. I really don't remember much about that. But I do remember my favorite Mountain Dew commercial. It's a scene outdoors. There's mountains, pine trees, a rough hiking trail. On a rock, center stage, is a bottle of Mountain Dew. From the right, a man approaches the Mountain Dew, and from the left, a ram walks between him and the Mountain Dew. What ensues in a feat of cinematic magic is a bone-jarring headbutting contest between the man and the ram. First blow, when the man stumbles back, has he been defeated? No. He gets up and he steels himself for a second charge, a second blow, and the ram crumbles. He stumbles, falls, and lumbers off the stage. The man wins. As the man consumes his precious Mountain Dew, his friends ask, "How are you feeling?" To which the man replies, "Not bad." Look it up on YouTube. It is so good. Philip Keller, who was an actual shepherd, knows a few things about sheep, though. And from that experience, he reflects on Psalm 23, which famously begins, "The Lord is my shepherd." And he describes how shepherding is a relational occupation. There's an intimacy between the shepherd and the sheep. Sheep, Keller tells us, are defenseless. They are stubborn. They're often unaware of the danger. They require continual oversight of the shepherd in order to flourish. He says that sheep only lay down when they are free from hunger and pests and tension. They rest only when they feel safe and cared for. If you haven't already read it, this book is a great meditation on one of the Bible's most powerful images of God. Even if we don't have much experience with sheep, though, I think we can understand something of the metaphor of sheep and shepherd, an image of the cared for and the one caring for. Today, Jesus opens our imagination as he reveals to us something profound about himself using a parable, or as John calls it, a figure of speech about shepherding. John chapter 10, if you want to follow along and let your eyes wander up and down the page. "Very truly, I tell you, Pharisees, anyone who does not enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in by some other way is a thief and a robber. The one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought out all his own, he goes on ahead of them, and his sheep follow him because they know his voice. But they will never follow a stranger. In fact, they will run away from him because they do not recognize a stranger's voice." Jesus used this figure of speech, but the Pharisees did not understand what he was telling them. Wait a minute. How did the Pharisees get here? Jesus addresses the story to them, and they are the ones who don't understand at the end. Why are the Pharisees even here? They're here because controversy. Always, it seems, Jesus and the Pharisees are in controversy. They are in a profound disagreement about this, that, or the other thing, which in John's gospel usually results in the Pharisees wanting to arrest or to kill Jesus. So we're picking up on a thread through the whole gospel of John here. For example, in John 5, it says, "So, because Jesus was doing these things, that is, healing, on the Sabbath, they began to persecute him. They tried all the more to kill him." Or John 7, the Pharisees heard the crowd whispering such things about him. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees sent temple guards to arrest him. Or out of John 8, at this they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds. And the present dispute in which Jesus finds himself actually started in chapter 9. Jesus, on the Sabbath, healed a man who was born blind from birth. I guess that's what it means to be born blind. The people who knew him were amazed. The man was amazed. The Pharisees were offended and indignant. So the Pharisees interrogate the man about whether the man who healed him was from God. Unsatisfied with the man's answer, they interrogate the man's parents, who say they don't know who opened his eyes. And so the Pharisees interrogate the man a second time, demanding that he declare the one who opened his eyes a sinner. When the man refuses, because he can't betray what he sees, they kick him out of the synagogue. At the end of this episode about who sees and who doesn't, Jesus goes and finds the man, reassures him, and says, "For judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." And when some Pharisees overhear this statement of Jesus, they ask, "What? Are we blind too?" And that's why Jesus tells the Pharisees this story about sheep and a shepherd and the gates and a gatekeeper, because they don't see, or they don't want to see, Jesus standing right in front of their eyes. The Pharisees didn't understand what Jesus was saying, and if we're honest, we probably don't either. What is Jesus saying? Who is he supposed to be in this story? Who are the Pharisees supposed to be? Who am I supposed to be? What does it all mean? Thankfully, Jesus sees the confusion and actually interprets the story for them. Not once, but twice. The first interpretation, he says, "I am the gate." Therefore, Jesus said again, "Very truly I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who have come before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep have not listened to them. I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and to find pasture. The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they might have life and have it to the full." Wait a minute. Okay, I was sure when I heard the story that Jesus first told that Jesus would be the shepherd, or at least the gatekeeper. Why is he saying he's the gate, an inanimate object? To be totally honest, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to take Jesus on Jesus' terms. Many interpreters have made the shepherd image so dominant in this passage that they actually say something along the lines of ancient shepherds would lay across the entrance of the sheepfold as a way to protect the sheep, which just means that I am the gate is another function of I am the good shepherd. Unfortunately, it seems that there is little to no evidence that in the ancient of this in the ancient literature. It's fake news. One scholar wrote this: "The only support," this is somebody who teaches the New Testament for a living, "the only support for the argument I have ever encountered made reference to a 1943 encounter with modern Bedouins." That's interesting. So today, instead of riding roughshod over Jesus' own words and trying to make them say something sensible to me, that makes sense to me, we're going to just try and take Jesus on Jesus' terms, even if it's hard or confusing. You remember that little bit I told you every time I preach John, it's a bit of a trip? Join me for the journey. I am the gate for the sheep, Jesus says. As we ponder the image, we notice that the gate is an access point. It is the way into the sheepfold and the way out to the pasture. It is the way in and out for the shepherd. Take a look at verse 2. And the sheep. Take a look at verse 4. It legitimates or affirms those who use it. It says, you belong here. It distinguishes the shepherd and the sheep who find life in the gate from thieves and robbers who come only to steal and destroy. We notice that the passage through the gate, it's a way of life. It's a daily rhythm, almost like breathing in and out. And in and out. It's not a one-way door. It's an in and out, and in and out. We also notice that the gate is a way to safety. It's the way to salvation. It's findable. It's available. It's open. The shepherd leads the sheep right to it. And it is serious life or death kinds of consequences. It's the way to protection from the terrors of the night and the way to life-giving, life-flourishing pastures in the day. Jesus says, I am the gate. As I ponder Jesus on his own terms, I can't help but think of the man who was born blind, kicked out of the synagogue because he chose Jesus, the gate for the sheep. I can't help but think of the church community in the first century hearing John's gospel for the first time. We can feel the fear of the man's parents when they tell the Pharisees, who opened our son's eyes? We can't say. Ask him. He's of age. John tells us they were afraid of the Jewish leaders who already had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. I don't think it's a big leap to imagine that the church hearing this gospel was a community also fearful of losing their comfort, their status quo, maybe even some important relationships, because they've acknowledged Jesus as Messiah. And I wonder a little about the fears that we face as we acknowledge Jesus as Messiah. Fears that we'll lose popularity or reputation. Fears that will be mocked as old-fashioned and backwards and out of step with the times. Fears that we'll lose our ability to have power or influence over the culture. The ones who are kicking you out of the synagogue, Jesus says, are the thieves and the robbers bent on your destruction. Don't be swayed by them. Don't run off with them. Don't court them. My way, Jesus says, is the way to abundant life. When we let Jesus tell us who he is on his own terms, it takes us to some pretty profound pastures, doesn't it? It comes as no surprise that Jesus' second interpretation of his figure of speech is this: I am the good shepherd, picking up in verse 11. I am the good shepherd, Jesus says. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand is not the shepherd and does not own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. Then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of the sheep pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there shall be one flock and one shepherd. The reason my Father loves me is that I lay down my life, only to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. In this second interpretation of the figure of speech, the characters have changed. We now have the shepherd, the sheep, of course, the hired hand, and the wolf. There's a lot to notice here, and I'm not going to get all of it, but here's the journey I've been on. First, among the things to notice is that the defining characteristic of the Good Shepherd is that he lays down his life for the sheep. In 8 verses, mentions it 4 times. The Good Shepherd is self-sacrificing for the sake of the sheep. It is very difficult to hear this and not think of Jesus' death on the cross. But if we're going to stick with the shepherd imagery a bit, we are immediately confronted with the fact that a dead shepherd is no good to their sheep. While they might put their life out on the line for the sake of the sheep, it'd be a pretty bad shepherd if they were simply seeking death. Susan Hyland, a New Testament scholar, suggests that John's language evokes an element of risk that early readers would have been likely to recognize, and that lays down his life could also be translated risks his life. If you spent any time studying John, you'll know that he often uses ambiguous words that can be translated multiple ways in order to draw out deeper layers of meaning. So he'll use a word that can be translated legitimately multiple different ways to draw us in and get us to think and peel back the layers of the onion. She concludes that this particular phrase seems well suited to convey a double meaning, suggesting both risking one's life and Jesus laying down his life in the crucifixion. And we can see, in fact, this is precisely what Jesus, the Good Shepherd, has been doing all along, risking his life for the sheep. Why were the Pharisees or religious leaders trying to arrest or kill Jesus? Oh, it's because he's doing good things like healing broken people and teaching about the gospel. He's healing broken people of their paralysis and their blindness, and they are furious. All in the face of death threats, Jesus keeps healing and teaching, doing the work of the Father. The Good Shepherd risks his life for the sake of the sheep. The Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sake of the sheep. And when the wolf comes to ravage the flock, we see clearly that the Good Shepherd is not a hired hand. In contrast to the hired hand, the Good Shepherd acts nobly, honorably, competently, properly, in the face of grave danger and his responsibility for the flock. In fact, noble might even be a better translation for the word here that we have, good. Jesus says, I am the kalos. It's a Greek word, shepherd. I am the kalos, shepherd. The opposite of kalos is not evil or bad, but actually shame. So the opposite of Jesus being the good shepherd is not an evil shepherd, but a hired hand who acts shamefully, without courage, who acts dishonorably, with self-interest and self-preservation at the core. Notice in the parable that the hired hand, unlike the thief and the robber, has a legitimate reason to be in the sheepfold. He knows how to take care of the sheep, has a relationship with the sheep. However, the hired hand's relationship to the flock is strictly business. They are a hired hand, under no compulsion to risk their life. The shepherd, however, owns the flock, risks everything to protect them. When mortal danger presents itself, the actions of the Good Shepherd and the hired hand reveal their true relationship to the flock. Jesus, the Good Shepherd, knows his sheep, and his sheep know him. Among all the voices that are calling out, they are familiar with his voice. They trust his voice. It is a reflection of, even participation in, the mutual intimacy that the Father and Son share with each other. It's the way Jesus, the Good Shepherd, does business. And again, I can't help but think there were Jews who had acknowledged Jesus as the Messiah, sitting in their first century church service, listening to John's gospel, fearful about the future, and wondering if they were following the right voice. And to them, Jesus says, I am the Good Shepherd. I lay down my life for the sheep. I fight the wolf to protect my sheep. I know my sheep, and they know me, like I know the Father, and he knows me. Jesus, in his own words, is the gate and the Good Shepherd. Now, often when we come to John 10, we interpret it as a parable about Christian leadership. We look at it as teaching to help us how to do church or family or business more successfully. And I'd say, inasmuch as we're trying to imitate Jesus, I suppose there's some profit to that. But it completely misses the point. Verse 19, the Jews who heard these words were again divided. Remember, controversy surrounds this whole thing. It's where it started, it's where it's going to end. Many of them said, he is demon possessed and raving mad. Why listen to him? But others said, these are not the sayings of a man possessed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? If this were simply a teaching of Jesus about leadership, it wouldn't be divisive. But it is deeply divisive. So much so that in just a couple verses, again, his Jewish opponents picked up stones to stone him. By the end of the gospel, as we know, Jesus is crucified. The Pharisees don't want to arrest or stone Jesus because he calls himself a gate or a good shepherd and calls them thieves and robbers. It's because Jesus says, I am. Centuries earlier, through the prophet Ezekiel, with whom the Pharisees would have been very familiar, God called Israel's leaders to account. Picking up in Ezekiel 34, says, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Woe to you, shepherds of Israel, who only take care of yourselves. Should not shepherds take care of the flock? You eat the curds, clothe yourself with the wool, and slaughter the choice animals, but you do not care, or do not take care of the flock. You have not strengthened the weak, or healed the sick, or bound up the injured. You have not brought back the strays, or searched for the lost. You have ruled them harshly and brutally. So they were scattered because there was no shepherd. And when they were scattered, they became food for the wild animals. My sheep wandered over all the mountains and on every high hill. They were scattered over the whole earth, and no one searched or looked for them. It is a stinging indictment of their shameful incompetence and corruption as leaders in Israel. Yet God, the one who will always be there for his people, the I will be what I will be God, the I will be what I need to be for you, God, the sovereign Yahweh says, I myself will search for my sheep and look after them. As a shepherd looks after his scattered flock when he is with them, so will I look after my sheep. I will rescue them from all the places where they were scattered on a day of clouds and darkness. I will bring them out from the nations and gather them from the countries, and I will bring them into their own land. I will pasture them on the mountains of Israel, in the ravines, and in all the settlements of the land. I will tend them in a good pasture, and the mountain heights of Israel will be their grazing land. There they will lie down in good grazing land, and there they will feed in a rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I myself will tend my sheep and have them lie down, declares the sovereign Lord. I will search for the lost and bring back the strays. I will bind up the injured and strengthen the weak. But the sleek and the strong I will destroy. I will shepherd the flock with justice. Yahweh has come, and Jesus says, I am. As we go out into this week, I invite you to soak in the metaphors of sheep and gate and the great I am, or that the great I am has given us. A couple questions for you. Where are you in relationship to the gate, in relationship to the good shepherd? Are you on the outside, but you're moving in? Are the inside, but moving out? Are you part of the good shepherd's flock? How well do you know the good shepherd's voice? How are you listening for his voice? Can you pick it out? Can you hear him amongst all the voices clamoring for your attention? What is he calling to you? Will you follow? What are you fearing the Good Shepherd will not protect you from? I invite you to name the thieves and the robbers and the wolves that are trying to destroy your life. I invite you to offer them up in prayer to I Am, who searches for you and fights for you, and rescues you, restores you. In what ways is Jesus leading you into the safety of the sheepfold and out into the pastures in the world? What gets in your way?
Thank you for listening to today's message. If you just made the decision to follow Jesus or are seeking next steps in your faith, send us an email to info@calgarycfc.com and one of our leaders will help you in your journey with Christ. God bless you.